Hey, before we get into this next podcast with Phil Freeman, I wanted to let you know, please go check out trenchcoffeeco.com and use the promo code ONESREADY. It's my absolute favorite coffee. In fact, I've sent numerous bags, at least 3 that I can think of, maybe 4 or 5, to the United Kingdom. They even said it was the best coffee they ever had. I give it out as gifts all the time, too, because of how good it is. Jeff and Jerica, phenomenal people. Still serving the community, and absolutely best coffee right out of Las Vegas. So please go check them out. trenchcoffeeco.com, promo code ONESREADY. And now on to the podcast. Yeah, very proud of you. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Ones Ready podcast. You're in the team room. We've got Trent, myself, and we've got retired Master Sergeant Phil Pimp Freeman. We probably won't go into how you got the call sign Pimp because it's an acronym. And I would hate to disparage you on YouTube by the 10 people that are actually watching and listening to us. But it is Phil or Pimp, and we're going to go with that from here on out. So welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah,
I'm
man.
only going to be able to think about that now. You just gloss over it. You bring it up and and then you say we can't talk about it. It's all I want to talk about now. It's all I want to talk about.
I don't have a problem.
That's all up to Phil. Well, then explain it real quick. Give a little bit of intro on who you are and what you're about, and then let us in on the whole Pimp thing.
Yeah, I'll get to the Pimp thing. So, born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, out in a place called Tucker, which is on the east side of Atlanta. Went to elementary school, high school there, played sports. Didn't really put a lot of effort into my high school like I should have, like I try to get on my kids to do. I think my parents just gave up. They're like, yeah, this guy's, he can eat crayons and play with Play-Doh the rest of his life. So, I graduated high school. Then I went to college locally and basically just wasted some time, got a few classes in. And, some friends of mine that were in school were like, hey, the teachers don't care if we show up. I'm like, really? So started going water skiing during the week and not paying attention, just really didn't have it together. So I ended up working for my dad, and we were building a log home out to the east of Atlanta, further east, out in the suburbs. Now it's part of the suburb of Atlanta, but back then it was out in the country. So I wanted to get the day off to go buy journey tickets, and he goes, you need to go in the military, because he was a Marine. He goes, you could join the Air Force. They have beer and ice cream. So they work 9 to 5. So I was like, all right, I'll think about that. He goes, if you go see a recruiter, I'll let you have the day off to go get those tickets. So I went and got the tickets because it was in the morning, had to spend a night, and all that. And then after that, I went straight over to the recruiter's office like he asked me to do, and walked in, and I was like, I want to be an air traffic controller. And thinking that there's not knowing any of the process. And of course, the recruiter's like, sure, you can be an air traffic controller. Started going through the whole list, and they, it's open general, open electronic, open mechanical, and open admin or something. I don't know. So he puts me in for open general. I had no idea what that meant, but he said you're going to be an air traffic controller. So, of course, yeah.
Oh,
you could be.
Yeah, I could have been. I could have been a lot of things, which I probably should have been. Handing out towels, driving a bus, flipping eggs, which actually,
Hey, so that's a good point. If you're out there, you're going to see a recruiter and somebody says, hey, I can get you in open general. That means you're open to anything that the Air Force needs of the Air Force. You don't get a say in what you do. So cautionary tale.
Yeah. I mean, it could have went real bad for me. But like I said, you could have been a cook. You could have, services or whatever, or driving vehicles, which, I got to do those things while I was in CCT. I got to drive a bus and a Deuce and some big vehicles. And I was, like, look at what, my friends could see me now, at CCS. I was the VCO
down.
And I screwed that up. I remember me and a guy, real good friend of mine, Tim Thompson, first time we filled up the Deuce, we took that sucker down to the gas station at Pope, put Bogas in it. And it's supposed to have diesel. I had no idea. But evidently that thing will run on anything. So
yes, it will.
Yeah.
Whiskey.
We did a lot of up downs and push-ups and whatnots that day. But it didn't tear up the deuce. So anyway, basically I'm standing in this like job picker guy's office, and he goes, "You got to pick 5 jobs." And so air traffic control, he goes, "Well, pick 4 more." I go, "I don't want to do anything else." He goes, "Well, you got to pick 4 more." I said, No. My recruiter said I'm going to be an air traffic controller. He goes, "You got to pick 4 more." So basically it got into I got told, pick 4 more jobs. So I was like, okay, I don't even know what to pick. I had no idea. And he goes, "Well, if you here," it flips this white pamphlet on the table. It said combat control. You make $50 extra a month with jump pay, and $50 extra a month with demo, and you get to go through air traffic control school. So I put that as my second choice, and then I had some other stuff, medical crap, or I forgot. I mean, it just didn't really matter. And so, but you really didn't know what you were going to do. A lot of people knew where they were going, so they had their job and they knew where they were going to tech school. So all I knew was I was going to Keesler, but I did not ever officially have my job listed until I got down to Keesler and they parceled us out to where we had to go. So roll into Keesler and meet a guy named Jack King, who was a tech sergeant at the time, and introduced us to what CCT was, and then it was push-ups and pull-ups anytime you go in and out of the building. This is before the pipeline. This is 87. So April 87 is when I went in basic. So this is like the 2 or 3 classes right before they changed the entire training program. So, I didn't even know, be honest, dude, I had no business doing what I was doing, but I just followed the crowd, and I was young and I never said I quit. So anyway, so now I went through the air traffic control school part, and then of course off to jump school, still not knowing what I'm doing. From Atlanta, so my dad came down and watched us jump. Then I went to Pope to CCS, and I started figuring it out then. But still, even on that radio day, you got to put your radios together. I'm sitting there, I've got a radio, and I'm like grabbing antennas, and I'm like, oh, I hope this is it. Ooh. I was like, I should have been on the blackjack table that day, because again, I'm still they're starting to break all that. Don't really care, study. I actually had to start putting in some effort and studying, and that's when it all started changing for me and in my life. And so that was like the first big switch from just being a goofball or a goober in Georgia to, going hunting and fishing, and that's it. And, nowhere to now I'm kind of starting to understand and get some things right. So went through CCS. At the end of it, they said, "Hey, whoever graduates gets to go to Pearl Harbor for dive school." So like everybody's like jumping up on the desk and doing the Hawaii 5-0, and it was a lot of fun. So we graduated, went straight into pre-scuba for a couple of weeks over there at Fort Bragg, and then the whole class loaded up on an airplane and flew to Hawaii. And we lived on Ford Island. So this is Ford Island before the bridge. So we had to take a ferry across the Pearl Harbor, and was there for dive school. And that was awesome. So.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, what was dive school in Pearl Harbor like? Because that sounds a lot better than Key West, where I went.
Well, Key West is fun too.
Well, yeah, of course.
Dive school, no matter what. Wherever you go, it's a kick in the balls. I'm Key West. I never went through it, so I don't know anything about it. So what I've heard, but I know that's a major nut kick. But it was the Navy ran it, and they weren't joking around. The PT wasn't that easy. We were in good shape, so it wasn't that hard. But they found ways to make it miserable, no matter what. So. Duck walking across the deck, all the way behind the school over, whatever they could come up with. So, but yeah, I enjoyed it.
Well, and
go ahead.
And not everybody got dive school before going on team back then.
No,
right?
we were the first team to go as a team. So that was kind of the precursor to before you get to your team, where the pipeline was starting to, where the pipeline is now. And I think they'd already kind of put that plan in motion, because now we're talking 1988. So guys that are coming in right now are going to Lackland first, or, they're not coming through like we did. So I think that was kind of why we did that. and they had a slot, or they just ran a whole school with all those empty slots for us. I turned 21 in Hawaii. That was a lot of fun.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So yeah, that was
you made it out.
So spent the time in Hawaii, and then went to Hurlburt for IFAM because I was assigned to Det 1 1723rd, which is Rhein-Main Air Base in Germany. So we had to go through Hurlburt, and we learned how to work with Talons. So, Talon 1s with a Fulton recovery, and 53s, and then Talon 2s or refuelers, the HC-130, at the time. So we were doing all that, doing all our workup for special operations, and then we went over to Germany, and I was there by 1 August 1988. Is when I basically was on station, and started the whole. There was no wars. It was just JSET training, and we had to be the parachute guy, we had to be the dive locker guy, we had to be the vehicle guy, the FF2 guy. We had no support except for very few, like supply radio, stuff like that.
Oh, that had to be a good time in Germany.
It was a lot of fun.
I mean, that's
a lot of fun.
Rhein-Main is Frankfurt.
Yeah.
If I
yeah. So we were right on the other side of the airport from Frankfurt, the Flughafen. It was a great place to be stationed, and and I wish I knew now and could have do what I did back then again, because I was young and I was all about going out and doing stuff, and not really hanging around with a team, all the time, on Friday nights and stuff. And I think that it means a lot to build that cohesive, that family, that unity, to stay and hang out socially with the guys, especially overseas. So I'd probably do a little more of that if I was to do that again. If I was to go back to, have those days again. But they were great days. I mean, we were jumping in Denmark, jumping in Belgium, got Belgian jump wings, Danish jump wings, Norwegian ones. I mean, we're diving in the Alps. We're in Spain. We're in Morocco, Turkey, Scotland, just working with PJs in England. It was nuts until the Desert Shield kicked off. We were always, every week, it was something different. A lot of fun.
Dude, the only thing worse than talking to guard guys is talking to people that were around before, like 9/11, or on either side of Desert Storm when things were fun.
It was, dude. It's
brutal to listen to.
J-sets. Dude, we'd leave on Monday, come back on Friday, do laundry, go out Friday night, Saturday night, come home Sunday, pack. Monday, you're gone again. I mean, it was just tons of fun. And one of the things.
I'm just gonna
go ahead. I'm sorry. What?
No, I'm just gonna. I'm gonna start calling us the salty generation, the only GWAT, like us? The whole 20 year. Yeah,
yeah.
But also, did you ever make it out to Kosovo? I heard good things happen.
Yeah. That made it to Kosovo, but that was after I gotten out and came back in. So okay. The Rhein-Main time, like I said, it was JSET after JSET until the Desert Shield, and then we went down to Turkey with a 10th group, Charlie Company. And we staged out of Batman, which is north of the Syrian or Iraq border, right where that corner is. And so we flew CSAR out of that and did some other things during the whole Desert Shield, Desert Storm. But it was just great times throughout the whole thing. One of the funny stories of that was we had this thing called the Fulton recovery system, which you guys are aware of. And they had, we would have to go and set it up. So you would open up the container, inflate the balloon, send it up, and it was like a blimp. I mean, like a Goodyear looking blimp thing with a tail and all that, so we could kind of hang in the wind. And then you hooked up typically a person, but they weren't doing it with live people at the time. So it was this mannequin called Fritz, and I guess his name was Fritz because he was from Germany. So we would go to this base. This Canadian base in southern Germany toward the Black Forest called Lahr Air Base, and set up the Fulton there. And that aircraft would come in and hit the line and pull up that old Fritz. And then one time, not just once, but it happened routinely, but one of the times the line broke and Fritz flew all the way to the other end of the airfield and landed in the grass. So we were filming it, and I wish I had a copy of
Poor
this,
guy.
because we were filming it. So we went over there and laid like Fritz did, and moved him out of the way, and then got up and kind of dusted ourselves off. So it looked like a dude got flung in the air through a slingshot all the way down a mile that way on the other side of the air. So anyway, it's kind of funny, I guess you got to be there type of thing, but it was a lot of shenanigans back then. It was a good time.
I guess now we know why they weren't doing it with live people.
Yeah.
I guess we got at least that right.
Yeah, that would have sucked. Yeah. So after Desert Storm, we went back to Germany. Stop loss it had been going on, so they wouldn't allow you to get out of the military in certain career fields, and ours was one of them. So I stayed in for a few extra months, and then finally we were back down in Turkey again for Provide Comfort, and they came out and said, "Hey, stop loss is over. What are you going to do? You can re-enlist. You can get $60,000 bonus, or you can get out." And I had been accepted to Embry-Riddle to go to flight school, because I'd started taking classes for college and while I was active duty, using tuition assistance, and which is the best thing in the world in the Air Force. It's a scholarship. So anybody thinking about going in, and it's huge, because that's how I got my degree. I didn't pay a dime except for books, and then my daughter used my GI Bill, so that's insane. So it's a great deal. So anyway, I was going to go to Embry-Riddle, got out 2 years. I said I'm not staying in. It was a bad time to ask me, because I had the runs from eating turkey food, and it was bad, and I was just miserable. So I was like, I'm out. So I got out, went back to Atlanta. I stayed in Europe for a little while. Had a friend that I was kind of hanging out with up from Sweden, so did that for a bit. Then just not being friends and all, but ended up back in the States and going back to school and actually doing well in school. I wanted to get to where I was making all A's. I was doing that, and I wanted to transfer into a bigger school, a 4-year, like big major college. So I was looking at going to Georgia Tech, and I had applied, and everything was on. I was on track to be able to go there for my third and fourth year. But Somalia had kicked off, and every time a guy would come back from Germany, they'd fly into Atlanta. And back then there wasn't the TSA issue. So I'd go to the airport. I'd meet him at the gate. We'd go to the bar, have a beer or two, talk about, what's happening now, old times. And finally, there's a chief named Doc Strange, who was our chief in Germany, and he flew back through. And he's like, "Hey, do you want to come back in?" And I said, "Yeah, I miss it." And one of the reasons I wanted to come back in, which I put on it as a different podcast I was on, I talked about, was I learned to play music and guitar, and I wanted to play guitar in Europe. So I know that's not the one's ready answer of why you want to do what we're doing.
There is no one's ready answer.
Is to eat nails, spit barbed wire, and be in shape all the time.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I was a doughboy, So anyway, so
you said it, not me.
Look, if you can roast others, you got to be able to take it and roast yourself. So
that's right.
So then they said I could come back in, and I was like, I miss it. I wanted to go over to Europe and play music, and so I entertained the idea, and I went and talked to the recruiter. But while I was out, I did some things I shouldn't have done. I got rolled up for drinking and driving, which back in 91, of course, I didn't have an accident or anything, but still it's a bad thing. And I got, it's never good, and made a big mistake, doing that. And then, of course, I thought I was full of piss and vinegar and could fight anybody out there. And when you go out and you scrap in public and win or lose, if the law gets involved, you're going to, you got to answer for that. So I had a couple things I had to answer to, and I went to see the recruiter, and they kept kicking me out. Like, "No, you got this since you got out, beat it." So the chief would have to call. So I'd show back up, and they go, "Anything else you need to tell us about?" I go, "Yeah, well, there's another, beat it." So finally I got called back in, and he had his boss in there from the whole area recruiter in Atlanta. And he was a master sergeant, and he proceeded to basically get in my ass. And I'm sitting there with a beard and everything. I'm like, "I'm not back in yet," but I was respectful, nice. We finished up, came back in. I went to Hurlburt. That was the closest base from Atlanta. I don't know how it got picked because Doc was a conventional guy at the time because he had come back from special ops. And back then it was conventional and special soft CCT. So I thought I'd be going to Little Rock or Charleston or somewhere else, and then ended up down at Hurlburt, which worked out well. And I had to go back through the process. And that's when it all started again for me, at Hurlburt at the 2-3. So I got there in January 93. So
January 93. Okay. And you missed the Somalia
I missed
push.
the Somalia push, the original one. We worked with SF Group up in Kentucky to go and participate in the exfil, but it never went. But we actually went up and with the isolation, all that stuff, and then it got kind of throttled back. We didn't end up deploying, or everybody didn't go. So yeah, I missed that. But although it was cool to train on it, that's the first time I got exposed to little birds and DAPs. And, then it routinely started working with those guys. And that was just a whole different, how cool is that? Riding on the outside of a helicopter, that little bitty
still
thing.
Cool now.
You're like, get your helicopter out of the way. It's so little, so cute. But a lot of fun doing that up at Fort Campbell. And, just being stationed with a lot of really good dudes at the 2-3 and going back through IFAM and just getting back in the swing of things. We got to go to went back over to Provide Comfort a couple times from there, and then went to Cuba for the Haiti uprising. I guess there was a coup going on at the time. It wasn't one of the earthquakes. It was they're trying to take over. So we went down and staged CSAR out of Guantanamo Bay. So it was, that was a lot of fun. There were some dudes out on the battleship, or not a battleship, but an aircraft carrier. And then us, at Gitmo, which was a lot of fun flying that, now flying from there to Hurlburt with a T-duck hanging out the side of the door in a dry suit for 14 hours in a 60 is not fun. But, peeing in a piddle pack.
It's a long flight.
Long flight. Yeah. 14 hours in a dry suit with a boat hanging out the door.
Ew.
Doing self-SAR, CSAR. So, but good team. Ken Knutson, pararescueman, was the team leader. Great dude. I'd follow that guy anywhere. And, so really some good dudes that were there, at the 2-3 that, a lot of experience, a lot of way they shared it and trained up the guys that hadn't had any experience at the time. Because back then, not a lot of guys had combat experience. Desert Shield, Desert Storm was just finishing up. There were some dudes that got some stuff, but not like today where dudes are just all, combat hardened.
Yeah. What was that? That was Operation Uphold Democracy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So spent 2 years at 2-3. And then did what I told you there. And then I got because right when I got to Hurlburt, getting back in, I put my name in for extended long overseas to England and Germany. Because back then there was a Ramstein team and a Mildenhall team. So I put my name in for both. In 2 years on the dot, I was gone and I had orders of Mildenhall. So that was a cool piece of, cool thing to happen. So right before I went to Mildenhall, I met my wife, Jackie, over at Navarre Beach at the Holiday Inn, which is no longer there, got wiped out by a hurricane. And we dated. Not long. If you're a betting man, you'd bet against this and you were lost, evidently. But we dated for 5 months, roughly, because I was TDY a lot, doing some other JRXs and other TDYs up until I PCS'd. And then I PCS'd in March, the middle end of March. And was over there, and then finally I'm like, you know what? I think I found the right one. So I called her from a payphone at Mildenhall and asked her to marry me. She said, yeah. Went back in May and got married. So 5 months we were married, and now it's 27. Whew, 2 of them happy, maybe. Yeah,
27, 2 kids later.
Yeah. I think she's regretting it, but I'm pretty lucky. And again, nobody would have bet that this would have worked. And I've tried real hard to get this thing to end. And life ain't over yet. So
try to call it off.
Yeah. Oh man, I could go into that.
But did
Sorry,
you get to,
Jackie, love you.
Anyway, yeah, she's the one who probably should have tried.
Did you get to play your guitar in Europe?
I did. I Milton Hall. I got to play in the pubs all around Milton Hall, and then I was asked to come back to Germany twice on New Year's Eve to play Irish pubs over. So we'd go down and we'd ski or something and then hang out and get paid to play the pubs. 2 or 3 nights, and then I started playing rugby over in England, and I would play in the pubs right after the rugby matches, which was a lot of fun because you take, our rugby team and the opposing rugby team into a bar and the place goes crazy. Everybody's drinking, having a good time. And so that was a lot of fun playing music in England because you got £100, which is about $160, £100 a night for 2 hours. And then you got to drink for free because that was my going rate. And the pubs closed at 11. Now I think they stay open later, I think. But back then, 11 o'clock, boop, streets rolled up. So unless you were at like a nightclub, if you will. So that was a lot of fun. Scored my first try and had to drink a beer out of a dirty old muddy boot right on stage. That was a mess, drinking beer with a club of mud in it. But really good time at Milton Hall. So from Milton Hall, I started my JTAC training back at the 2-3. And back then there wasn't the MQT process. We had a certain amount of days. You went through JFCC at the time, and then you just continued your training until you got evaluated. We didn't have time limits like we do now. And so I started the process at 2-3, and I got my evaluation. Actually got eval'd at Nellis. So my first evaluation was done at the 70s ranges at Nellis. And that was in 96. So November 96. So after that, I progressed through the instructor, the instructor process pretty quick. And then I got to, we were doing San Vito a lot for CSAR at the time. But once you got your JTAC rating, San Vito was pretty much a wrap. You started going to Bosnia. So I went into Bosnia to Uglavik and worked with the Russian Spetsnaz for 4 months. I was attached to 10th Group out of Fort Carson at the time. That was a blast. I mean, I'm sitting here in my office looking across right now at one of my cabinets, and I've got a Russian Afghanistan war beret that this guy named Vladimir gave me, who was their chief enlisted guy or warrant officer. Him and I hit it off real well, but he couldn't speak English and I couldn't speak Russian, but he could play guitar and drink vodka, and I could play guitar and drink vodka. So we ended up hitting it off pretty well. And their vehicles, they were BTR 80s. They were just, it was tight. You had, they're really not that big of dudes. They're skinnier than us a little bit. They're, really we could outperform them in every aspect of the job except for fighting. They would fight like hand-to-hand fight at PT and blood, like headbutting bricks and stuff. It was intimidating and cool to see. So I think it might have had a purpose, but shoot and move, communicate, they couldn't hold a candle. Even the Air Force guy was winning some of that stuff. So got to do some really cool stuff with the Navy there. Got to go to these places called the JCO houses, which was the Joint Commissioned Observers. So there were these houses in these little towns around Bosnia who would integrate with the local populace, trying to convey, the U.S.'s message and that, what we're here to do, and then help bring in the factions to talk together and mediate meetings and stuff. And a few times things got hot. So like the JCO house at Birchco got overran when Birchco got sacked by a bunch of dudes, a bunch of rebels up there. And so we had to respond to that. AC-130 was flying, and there's some other things. We had to protect radio antennas for their election broadcast because they wanted to make sure it was fair that both sides got to say their message. Even though we kind of backed one, we didn't say only the one we're backing gets to say their message. We just made sure that everybody got to say their message, and mainly ours, because they were the opposing faction was trying to take down all the radio towers so they couldn't get their message out. So we had to protect those. So it was pretty cool. We found some mass graves. That was odd. But overall, it was a really cool experience working with the Russian Spetsnaz. It's just, I mean, I can't believe I'm saying it out loud. That I mean, now.
I was gonna say it's just so weird to hear. Like, oh yeah, I was attached as an Air Force guy. I was attached to the Spetsnaz.
I follow.
Times have changed.
And the guy I followed was Jeff Gilmain. And I'm gonna tell you now, you do not want to follow Jeff Gilmain on anything. No. Yo, now, and here comes me like, hello, ciao, where? You know. So that was that took a minute, but you know, got to prove myself, and you know, had a good rotation there. So, and then unless you got something to ask about that, I'll continue on. We're good. Continue with that.
Well, I mean, didn't you get in a firefight or something like that?
Mission. No.
Oh, not
so
that.
Then I started. Okay. After that, I started pulling. I actually even before we had this rotation in Stuttgart for the SIF, so the Charlie Company rotation, and I was one of the first CCTs to go there. And that was a lot of fun because you're there by yourself. You lived in a dorm. You didn't have a vehicle. You basically just trained. You lived across the street from C Company. You showed up, you trained, you shot, you moved, communicated, you brought what you could bring to the fight, and you integrated with your team. You didn't have any way to go anywhere else to screw around or get lost or get in trouble or get a DUI, if you will, or whatever. I mean, because you didn't have a vehicle. So you're just, you were just there. I mean, it was a really cool experience that working with C Company. I got to do a lot of neat things and got to do some workup for some stuff because I did that rotation 3 times and we spun up a couple times. We actually went to Gabon for a NEO, which is to get all the non-combatants out of the Democratic Republic of Congo, which that was a really cool event. So funny story about that was I flew in with the SF, and of course the SOG for Mildau flew in. So they're all in the hotels, and I'm not talking Holiday Inn. I'm talking the Mersin, the nice 5-star hotels with casinos and stuff. So that's where they're at. But we're with the Army, and we're laying in a hangar with a bunch of stuff crawling along the ground, and that's some angry ground over in Africa. So I'm laying back in my little roll, and I look up at it. I'm just staring at an ISU, just staring at it, and I'm like, all of a sudden it dawned on me. I see the 321st sticker. I'm like, that's from my unit. So I go up there and do the normal combo. Bing! It opens up. I open that sucker up, full of cots. I'm like, we got cots, boys. So we took all the cots, all the MREs. Probably shouldn't have done that, but they didn't. Luckily they didn't need it. But we all used it. We were using it because we were stuck. Eventually, we ended up going down to a hotel, but it took a while before we got to that process. It was kind of toward the end of the rotation. But anyways, the Charlie Company gig was a blast, and I think they're still doing it today. And it's more robust now with more guys and pararescuemen, and they put the whole team down there. And I'm glad they're doing it because it's a great way to integrate. So because you had Charlie Company, well, you had Alpha Bravo Charlie Company of the 1st Battalion over there, but we dealt with Charlie Company, and then you had the Navy who was on the other side of Panzer, and they were doing some stuff in the Bosnia and whatnot. So when I got attached to them, we went into Sarajevo. So I replaced Kirby Rodriguez, I think, at the time in Sarajevo, or Van Anderson, one of the two. But good dudes. I mean, once again, I mean, you're like, oh, what? We drafted first, not last, and I'm like, all right, well, So, living there at this hotel right there in this compound in Sarajevo, got to go downtown quite a bit and do some stuff, and a lot of fun with the Navy. So basically what happened on the firefight is there was, now we're an allied force, and Kosovo is a big deal, and Serbia, or not Serbia, up near, I can't think of it right now. Milosevic was the guy we were going after and everything. So anyway, there were some Serbia. There were some trains that were taking chemical weapons and troops down to Kosovo. So they said, you got to go stop that train. And they asked, around, say, hey, so one entity needed a 72-hour planning process. And we're like, well, by that time, the train's going to be there. So the Navy said, we'll go now.
Yeah.
So we loaded up and went. And we're driving across, and we got maps folded out. We had to go link up with these Italian dudes and these German dudes. We're going to be at the QRF. And this is overnight. And we're supposed to do this at night. And our plan was to blow the railroad tracks at night and put chem lights up to stop the train. I don't think chem lights would have stopped the train, but I just was like, whatever. I was just listening to this. I'm like, okay.
Just out there waving. Yeah. No.
So we go up over we're talking up to the top of these mountains and stuff, and we're coming down into toward where Serbia is, Bosnia, Serbia, kind of where the border is. And we met with the Italians, and they were going to be part of our QRF, and then they said, we're not going. So they bailed. So then we took with the Germans, and the Germans were like, yeah, we'll go. So they had their version of the BTR, vehicles, but they had a hospital. I mean, theirs were a little cleaner looking and more robust. So we're in the Hummer. We're in basically slick Humvees, no gun trucks, no omnidirectional SATCOM antenna, none of that. We're just driving with, you got your turret lid up top. So we come down the mountain. Behind us, you can see these BTR, vehicles coming down the mountain. So like something's going on. So here we are. We run out of gas, or we're out of fuel. We're bingo fuel at the border. So we stop at a gas station, and the ensign's out there. We're filling up all the vehicles. Actually, you can't even fill them up. They fill them up for you because they got the little jumpers on, and the ensign's in there paying cash. And he's like, yo, want something? Guys are ordering Cokes and snacks. We throw them in the truck. We cross the border. It's daylight. And the team leader said, hey, don't call back and report our position because it's daylight. And I'm like, just, don't make any comments. They call you, you can respond, but don't call. Because he was afraid, and like everybody else was, we'd gone all this way. We didn't want to get, called off because of light. It's supposed to happen at night. Yep. So we're driving through these mountains. We're not even on roads now because we're trying to hurry to get there. And we pull up, and there's a house. And we're right to a river. It's, the most beautiful country you've ever seen. It's like the mountains of Colorado, and it's like a mix between the East and West Coast mountains in the States. So there was a family in the house, and there was a young guy, fighting age male, that took off up the hill because we were on a slope. The mountain was up top, then the train, and then there's more slope, and then the house, and then more slope, and then there's another road with a river. So I was in the last vehicle, but since we went in, now I'm in the first vehicle on the way out because we had to do the combat park and turn around. So I stayed down with the vehicles, was on comms for close air support and long range comms. And then there was a SEAL that was down there with us as well. And then another dude another SEAL who's on sniper rifle. And then everybody else is up there blowing up, laying demo on the tracks. And when they went up there, a gunfight started. So it was a big, grenades going, this and that. It was pretty cool to be a part of that. And then, we were like, holy, I remember distinctly when everything started going, and because the guns they were shooting down the track and shooting over our heads, and you could hear the snap. And I looked over at the SEAL, and he goes, they're shooting at us. It was like, we couldn't believe it. Like, yeah, I can't believe it. And it's not that, it's just because it wasn't a lot of experience, like today it's a normal thing. But back then, it wasn't. It wasn't norm. It wasn't the norm. So we couldn't believe it. I'm like, they don't know what they just did. And so we killed some dudes. And then the SEAL had also had a comm job where he was going to do long range comm, and I was going to do close air support. So when the gunfight started, he yanked his SATCOM antenna off the vehicle and threw it in the truck. When he did, he pulled the coax cable out. So I connected my SATCOM and started relaying back, hey, we're taking fire. Landslide was the term we had to use, and we need air. So they tried to send some Apaches over the mountains, and the mountains were 10,000 feet. The clouds were 2,000. That wasn't going to work. So we had some fighters that flew circles around, and there was a guy named Donnie Nickel and Mike West who were also at that Siege of Soda hotel where we stayed. They were part of the Siege of Soda staff, and they went over to the ASOC, and they're pointing at aircraft, trying to send aircraft over to me. And anyway, so we mitigated the threat, and then we start driving out. And while we're driving out, the ordnance, the explosions are going off, and then all the rocks and crap are falling all over the place. So I was on top of the Hummer trying to still make comms because I needed to continue to relay information. So I'm up. I popped the lid. I'm up there with a little wrist compass, holding it at 240 at 45. I remember that angle and dangle, and I'm sitting there. And I key up, and it's burning me because there's an RF burn. I was like, I'm getting like this little shocky burn, but I'm sitting there holding it and making the comms, and we went down to the road and we turned left, and it said Beograd left, and it like Tuzla or whatever to the right. And our guys took a left. And I go, that Beograd means Belgrade. So we had to turn around. And that was like an Austin Powers turnaround because we were on a road that was this narrow with rivers. We had a mountain and a river. So it would beep, 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 beep. We had all this nonsense. So finally, now we're back at the last vehicle again. And we're driving, and and then the Siege of Soda gets on and says, "Hey, did you take pictures of the railroad being destroyed?" No, because we were in a gunfight. Well, he goes, "Go back and get pictures." And we're like, "Hold tight." So I had to get the SEAL team leader come back, and he's like, I hand the mic to him, and I hear him go back? Like I already knew that was happening. I'm like, this is not going to be fun. So we got the Germans to come down and actually pull up into that house with us with their 20 millimeter cannon pointing up the hill, and the guys went back up there and took pictures of it, and then they found some explosive didn't go off, so they took TNT from the Germans and went up there and blew it again, although what they blew would have worked, but they went ahead and blew it again. And I guess there's a certain amount of track that you've got to knock off one half of the track, and that same ensign's like, hey, you need to knock off 17.3 feet. I'm like, how does this guy know that stuff? I mean, that's their job. So that was a pretty cool deal. When we drove back to Sarajevo, the roads were cleared for us the whole way back. They had people with artillery and other security from other NATO forces that were guarding the roads all the way back for us because there were people that were after us, supposedly, but who knows? But it was cool to be. We weren't escorted back, but the road was cleared for us. Kind of like Smokey and the Bandit.
Yeah.
So
you can max out that speed on that Humvee, which is super fast.
Dude, it took forever. By the time we got back, it was dark. So we went through an entire day process. So that was kind of cool. But Mildenhall was good. I mean, left there in 2000. Got to do that. Like I said, that was probably the highlight. The Charlie Company stuff was awesome. And then of course doing other training around and other rotations, and the team over there was incredible. I met my son's godfather over there, and one of my best friends, which is a logistics dude named Jeff Shingle. He's been in ST since 93, 94, and still is today. Played rugby over there with him. So it was just overseas is really cool. It's a family oriented kind of a community. It's neat. So that's up until Mildenhall.
Oh yeah.
So keep going. Okay. Get to the school part.
I like to cage you a little bit, right? Because I know Trent's never met you, but you're one hell of a storyteller, right? Like you hold court all the time, and you really need to be I don't even know what it would be, a professional storyteller or something like that. But skipping those, I guess it would be 4 years. Like I want to hit the weapons real quick, because you were like, what I'm doing today is something that like initiated with you. Like, so I want to highlight that. I want to hit that because for the folks out there, they definitely don't know the story, and I don't know that I know all the details and in and outs.
Yeah. So I PCS from Mildenhall to the 2-2, and I was very pleased with that assignment. I've never been, actually I've been TDY up there one time to a JRX, but to be assigned there, I was ecstatic. I mean, because, it was either Pope or Hurlburt or 2-2, and I've already been to Hurlburt, and I mean, I just preferred to go to 2-2. That was just what I wanted to do, and I lucked out and got that assignment. So was on a team there for a while, and then I developed that relationship with the Navy from Sarajevo, and the LPO became a chief, and he ended up being the NSW LNO at Hurlburt at the USAF Special Ops School. So the SAS, the Special Ops School down at Hurlburt, over there near the gym and the same road, where billeting is and everything. So he was down there doing that, and we stayed in touch. And he goes, "Hey man, we have instruction courses, we have threat courses like force protection level 1, 2, 3 courses. I'd like to have you down here. We'll pay your way. All you got to do is just get permission from your unit to come, and we'll fund the whole thing." So I went into my boss, Terry Mackey. I was like, "Hey, this is what I'd like to do." He goes, "They're paying for it. You got nothing going on? Do it." So I was down here at Hurlburt, and that's when September 11th happened. So we're going through Dynamics International Terrorism, and I'm in the Special Ops School auditorium, and we just got through listening to the guy who got kidnapped by the FARC in Colombia, and he walks out, and they flip on the screen, and they show one of the towers burning, and then we watch the second airplane hit it. So right then it was like one of the proctor comes down. He goes, "This is why we're here. This is why we're in this course." I mean, I'm getting chills thinking about it, because I mean everything changed right then and there, and people were going back. There's a phone bank where you could call. People were calling, and while they're on the phone, and I'm trying to call my wife, saying, "Hey, wake up, this is going on." I hear people, "Oh, the Pentagon just got hit." So I mean, it was live happening while I was at DIT. Of course, it's happening in DC and New York, but it's just to hear it from somebody that's talking to somebody at the Pentagon, because there's a lot of intel folks there, was kind of brought it, made it a little more, a little different. So anyway, the class was pretty much done. If you needed to leave, you could leave, but of course nobody could fly anywhere. So if you drove, you could drive out, but you couldn't fly home. And I was across the country, so I had to wait till they opened up the airports again. So the force protection thing had stopped. So we've just finished the DIT piece. So we got to finish that week, and then I flew back to McCord, and I went in to see Colonel Mackey, and he's like, "Hey, you're in the being in the fire shop, you need to go get every bit of cash you can find, because we're going to be doing close air support. As much everybody's going to need to be JTAC qualified, or actually at that time it wasn't even JTAC, because that came along in 2003 for the first JTAC MOA. So back then it was TAC, or SOTAC actually even used the term, not the course, but as a dude. So I had been, we had been going to Gila Bend a lot already, and had a good relationship at Gila Bend with the F-16s there. But I had trained at Nellis. Remember, I got my check ride in 96, and I've been actually going to Nellis a lot, 96, 97. I somehow was on a trip every year, and it was at the CT after the December class. It was that CT week is when we were doing all this. So I'm like, I want to go down there and see if I can sort out some training. So me and a dude named Paul Goebel got in the vehicle and drove. And Mackie was like, "I don't want you driving, because if I need you back, you need to be back immediately." And I'm like, "So we're going to take weapons, all the gear. We need to have everything, compartmentalized, and flying with all that's a pain in the ass." So, convinced him to let us drive. So we loaded up everything in a blue 6-pack and drove. We stopped in Reno on the way in, and then we went to Vegas, and I went to the weapons school and I put on a uniform for this. I went in and I went to the A-10s, because that's where I'd done some training before. And I walked into the trough, and it was empty, lights out. I was like, well, that sucks. So got back in the vehicle. I wrote a note on the DO's desk. So if you walk in the trough, the DO is to the right. I know the commander's to the left now, but there was a point where they were swapped, because usually a DO would become the commander, and he just didn't change officers. So anyway, I went in to the right and wrote a note on the desk saying, "Hey, Phil Freeman, Staff Sergeant from the 22 STS was stop by to try to see if we could set up some training with you because our guys are getting ready to go forward. And left that on the desk. So I'm driving out the gate. I changed clothes because we still got to go to Arizona. And we stopped at In-N-Out Burger. I think that's what we did. Stopped at In-N-Out Burger. I got an In-N-Out Burger shirt. We ate mustard on it, whatever, you know. And so we're getting ready to leave town, and I get a phone call on the cell phone saying, hey, this is Major Malachowski at the 66 or, you know, the A10 WIC. You know, you left a note on my desk. You got 5 minutes. Get back here now. So I'm like, oh, shit. So, oops. So I said, oh, crap. So I turned around and went back, and I didn't have time to put on the uniform. So I go bebopping in there, and just I lay my case out. I'm like, hey, I think we're some of the better JTACs out there, or, you know, TACs. I think we want to train with the best. You guys are the best CAS unit, CAS platform, and I want to try to make this synergy work. And you know, and it, you know, we had trained there before, and I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know when they'd be able to do it or any of that. And so Malachowski looks at me. His M10's his call sign. The M10 looks at me and goes, who's your commander? What unit are you at? I'm like, oh, man. I'm standing there in civilian clothes. I'm like, oh, man, this ain't going to go well. So I call ops, you know, from his phone. And I'm like, hey, because I didn't know the commander's number. He wanted the commander's number. And I'm like, I didn't know. So I was like, hey, man, I need Colonel Mackey's number because I'm at the weapons school and I got a guy that wants to talk to him about us training. So they're like, what'd you do? And I'm like, just give me the number. So give me the number. And I give it to him and I dial it up and say, hey, Colonel Mackey, there's a guy who needs to talk to you. I'm at the weapons school trying to set up training. And, you know, here you go. I'm just waiting. Well, those two dudes played at the Air Force Academy together. While Mackey was a linebacker, M10 was a defensive end, and they were tight. I mean, they were like brothers. So, you know, it was it was funny. I mean, I was sweating, and they're like, you know, he's like, hey, we're going to take care of you. We'll get, you know, back then I wasn't Pimp yet. So we'll get Phil down here and get your team. We'll get you trained up. We'll do it between the classes. So it's CT. We can meet your needs. And, you know, so that's what we did. We set that up for December, and that was the first, you know, real trip that initiated, besides the other ones that we were just in and out when we were, you know, that was the first real, you know, after that training, I'm like, you know what? We want to stay here. We want to do this more, you know? So before I left, I'm like, hey, we're deploying, but if we're back by June, I want to do this again in June and bring more guys down, because we're talking, we didn't have a lot of JTACs in the 2-2, you know, so we're still training them up. I mean, before we left, we trained Gabe Brown. We trained like Bruce Hurst was a part of it, Ray Bollinger. I mean, there's a lot of guys who are icons in the JCAT community now who are just now, you know, getting their whole JTAC career going, you know. So it was kind of cool to see. So we went overseas and came back, and then we're doing that June trip. And that's when we trained. We trained Jake Chandler, Chris Grove. I mean, all these names that are, you know, your peers and or maybe even a little bit above, you know, dating ourselves. So got these guys trained up. We actually did some more full mission stuff. We were moving around. We were trying to, you know, push the limits a little bit on training. So then the Trough called me up in August because we were going to come back and we were going to support the weapons school task phase in August on our own dime. We had money, so we're like, okay, we'll come down on our own dime. We don't know. We just want to be a part of it. So they were like, okay. So August, they call me and they say, hey, man, can you support all of the ranges and all the OPs? I'm like, wow, what happened? What do you mean? He goes, well, the ASOS just fell out. We don't have any support. So I'm like, absolutely. So I went to Mackey, made sure, yep. So we filled every OP at every spot for a whole, you know, cast phase was a month. So we did that, did a decent job, continued to learn. And after that, it just was that was the beginning. It's kind of funny how an ASOS falls out, we take over, and we never left. You know, I mean, that was kind of cool. Yeah,
like a tick.
Matter of fact, the day I went in there and got called back in with the In-N-Out deal, the SEALs were there, and they were training there quite a bit. But once we started training there, it kind of dwindled a little bit. You know, we started bringing them back in with Tad Morrison was their lead guy. So yeah, we started training there at the Trough. And so from 2001 to 2003, we were training at Nellis every chance we could from the 2-2. So while I deployed back to Afghanistan and to Iraq, and while I was there, I got orders to PCS to the group. So I was going to be the fires guy at the group with Matt Schleich, who was back then he was a TAC P, who's now retired senior. So I PCS to the group. Mike Martin pulled me down there because he saw what we were doing at Nellis. He thought it was a good thing, so he pulled me down to the group. I don't know how he was a captain at the time, but worked it out to where I came down there to run the fire shop. So while I was down there, we were going to Nellis probably 8 months a year, spending God knows how much money on flights and excess baggage and all the crap we were doing. But we also started bringing in the other units because the 2-2 couldn't do it all, and I'd left. I'm now with the group. I've got a bigger, enterprise to look after. So we started bringing everybody out there. And then 2006 or 2005, it started. They're like, hey, we need to put an OLB out there. So just a debt, if you will. So they started doing all the passcodes and positions, and they came up with the OLB, and they basically actually Colonel Brown at the time, CQ Brown, the chief of staff, was one of the commandants there when all this happened. And there was a few burbles, a few bumps in the road as we went through the process, because guys still got in trouble. So all the crap that went wrong compared to all the crap that went right, I would have to say more went right than wrong, because now we got a WIC and we got Peaches as the chief up there running things. So,
that's pretty funny. I'm just thinking about all the things that went, all the little bumps in the road, if you will, everything that Vegas has to offer.
I mean, we got guys in the Hooskow in casinos. We got them at the Hooskow down in downtown. We got guys putting cars in the wall down on I-15. I mean, we got guys taking out stop signs. I mean, it was a mess. But we also trained our ass off and got guys really good, and they cared. Because back what I was saying earlier about the Rhine-Mine thing, remember, I get done with work, boo, I'm downtown. But now at Nellis, I get done with work, I'm staying because I want to make myself better at CAS and talking tactics over a Jack and Diet and some spicy popcorn, jalapeno popcorn. It really just, you start absorbing it like a sponge. And so that was what I did every Friday night. I stayed on base and hung out with the pilots and then it filtered out to all the other MDSs. Now we're hanging out with the Vipers and Strike Eagles. And then the MQ, the RPAs came on board with a new WIC, and it just permeated out throughout. Matter of fact, we F-15C CAS and took their pilots to the range, and they got to shoot, move, communicate with us and see what we do. And we worked Raptor Cat. I mean, all kind of neat stuff. So that's how we basically showed our worth, showed that we care, showed that we were here for not only for us, but for them. And that's how that all started. But before all that process, we'll get to the pimp real quick. So
we're going to close with
so
the pimp
2003, then. Roughly 4, I think 5, I forget, whatever, 4. Go to the NASCAR race because the honorary commander of the A-10 squadron is Mr. G, Michael Gahn, was at South Point. So they had a suite at the NASCAR race, and his son Brendan, one of me and Peach's very good friends, was racing and doing stuff. So we're up at the suite having a good old time, and we had tailgated before going in, and of course we kept on pushing it up during the race. So now the race is over and we're down on the strip and continuing to go. And I overserved myself, I guess, or somehow got overserved, and I went to the restroom and I'm taking a leak and I hiccuped or something, and my hand slipped off my pants, and my underwear jumped back up on me. And while I was midstream, and I just put my hand on the wall and just said, "This is a miserable day." Finished peeing, came out,
in the pants.
Told the guys, "Hey, I gotta go." It's like 9:30, 10 o'clock, which is early. I'm like, "I gotta go." They're like, "What are you leaving for?" I go, "I just gotta go." So I go. I'm in a 40-knot headwind going through the New York casino. I didn't know the wind would blow that hard in there. So I get to the taxi line and a van pulls up, and they open the door and they put me in the van, and he goes out. And when you take a cab and you go back on 215 or you're going south Vegas, you do a loop like a 180. So when that dude did that 180 in the New York parking lot street drive, I flipped down and my head was down in between where the door is. That van, had the little steps up. My head's down there. My legs are in the air. I got pee coming out of my shoe, rolling down. I'm like, I don't belong anywhere in public right now. So I was a hot mess. So I go home, which I was staying at Lake Las Vegas. So that's a long drive on your head, but that's what I was, and the dude was trying to like help me up. I'm just like, just drive, just go. Don't even help me. Don't even help me. Just go, man. Just go.
Just let me die.
So then I go to the trough, and I made a mistake by telling somebody about the story. The guy I told was Soup Campbell. So they they were like, you're here enough. We're going to name you. Because typically they'll give guys a call sign naming, and it's typically a big deal, a naming night or whatnot. And I didn't, unless you have a weird name or do really something weird in CCT or funny, you're not going to get a name unless that happens. But in the fighter community, everybody gets a name. But if you screw up, that's going to be something around your name. So they have a whiteboard and they write it all down, and you could drink the name off, but somebody else could drink it back on. And the top one was Butterbean. And I'm like, I'm not being called Butterbean. So I'm just slamming 30 Mike shells of Jack to get Butterbean off. And then Smooth and other people are drinking them and putting it back on. And then I'm drinking and putting it back off. So it got down to Butterbean we were fighting back and forth with Butterbean. And all the other names had gotten lined out, which I don't even remember what they were. And then finally, Soup rolls in and goes, I got it. It's Pimp. And everybody's like, Pimp pissed in my pants because he pissed in his pants at the New York a couple of weeks ago. And I'm like, oh, God, I told you that. So, and I couldn't drink any more off. And I'm like, is that? And then it went around the room. And of course, there was another flying squadron in that was in there for support. So that place was packed. And they're, woo. Yeah. I had that big garbage can that's on wheels was right next to me. I filled that thing up.
And it got filled
up. I was sober
up
by the time I left because everything came out. So, So anyway, that ended up, that was the call sign thing. So PCS and Nellis started the discussions with all the Air Warfare Center commander and the commandant and the ST and we just, and the TACP community was in on it. There was Troy Lundquist was in on it. There's a guy named Chaz Erickson that was in on it. Matt Schleich was a big piece of it. So it was really cool to see CCT and TACP come together in unity, try to push forward to have a WIC. And we got shot down by everybody. You'll never get a WIC. We had ACC old goobers, that were dudes that just need to go away. They aren't doing anything good. You'll never get a WIC, so.
Pretty sure there are people that are saying that about me.
I hope they hear what I'm saying. But the good thing is we were like, look, we don't care about your patch. We just want the education. That's all we want. Because we can't touch a patch. Like enlisted dudes can reach and touch their patch if they're in an MDS, more likely. We can't. And we wanted the education. We showed that we needed it because we had to apply air power. It's not just calling in, cleared hots. It's applying air power and planning the whole thing from start to finish is a big deal. So finally, after no's and yeses, and we had LD Card, which was the ATN commander that helped fight for it. And then after LD left, Johnny Bravo Drowley was there. He helped fight for it. And so it got to a point where Peaches, Brian Patton, Dave Dilbickle were the SOCOM guys. They were AFSOC guys when I retired. And they brought in, after I was gone, some ACC guys came and they built a WIC. And I mean, that's probably the most proud thing I have, that I've been a part of. I mean, I know I didn't write the syllabus and that's a lot of work that goes into it, but I'm elated every time I think about it and what we've done. And I say we, because it's not just me, it's the guys that busted their ass out there doing good jobs and making up for the buffoonery. And I've even said it. I go, before I left, it was just an AIC. Well, it wasn't even that. It's like, you're going to be a WIC. And people, no, you became a WIC. And I said, eventually, one of these WIC guys are going to be the chief of this place. You got that. The only thing we haven't accomplished is the Reisner. And I maybe because there's not a war going on, it might be difficult. But if something kicks back in and we get a guy who's gone through this, who really makes an impact on how we're fighting, I think that's a very, very high possibility that you could see that happen.
For sure. No, without a doubt. And, you know, thanks for everything that you did do for the weapons school and stuff like that. And for CCT, you know, not just training while at Rhine-Mine, you know, all the stuff in the 90s, even after separating, all the training that you took guys through post 9/11, and then definitely for the weapons school. And really the cherry on top was the pimp story. So I'm glad you were able to put that out there. But Phil, we definitely got to bring you on again because you, like I said, you're one hell of a good storyteller. I got more stories to tell you. I'm sure some of them would probably need to be like a Patreon episode behind a paywall so that, you know, we don't get
so the children can't just
flagged or canceled for.
Well, I mean, I've also stepped on it, and I'm willing to share all those stories so guys don't make the same mistakes I made. I have no problem talking about anything anybody wants to talk about that I've done in my career, because it should be transparent. We're in the military. We represent this community. We're taking the taxpayer dollar to do what we're doing. It should be transparent. Everything we do should be transparent. And if you can't do that, you know, if you screw up, you get called out and you get your butt kicked. But do you quit? Do you cry? Or do you continue to push it? So I'll be glad to come back and discuss that more.
Keep it up. Yeah, man. All right. Well, everybody out there, appreciate you tuning in, listening. Please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave us a review, and then be on the lookout for future giveaways and future episodes. We're out here. Later, guys.